Once upon a time, in a monastery surrounded by silent mountains, there was a young monk named Liang. Since childhood, he had felt a restlessness in his heart, a deep desire to understand the true meaning of the path he was following. One day, after years of study and meditation, he dared to ask his master, "Master, after so much time by your side, I still do not understand the essence of your teaching. What did your master leave you when he departed?" The elder smiled serenely and, without saying a word, stood up. With slow movements, he took his robe, which had worn down over the years to half of what it once was. He then extended his bowl in front of Liang and waited. The young monk furrowed his brow. "Master, I am not referring to objects," he said with unease, "but to the real teaching." The elder looked at him with compassionate eyes and calmly replied, "I have already shown it to you." Liang felt something stir within him, but he still did not understand. Liang lowered his gaze, confused. He looked at his master's worn robe and the empty bowl in his hands. How could these objects contain a teaching? The elder sat down again and, with a gesture, signaled to Liang to do the same. "Liang, tell me," asked the master with a soft voice, "what do you see in this robe?" "I see that it is old, worn out by time and use," replied the young monk. "That is right," said the master. "When my master gave it to me, it was new. Over the years, it has been unraveling, but it still covers me. I have mended what needed mending without clinging to its original state." "What does this tell you?" Liang reflected for a moment before replying, "That everything changes over time, and that we must accept that change." The master nodded with a slight smile. He then lifted his bowl and tilted it slightly. "And what do you see here?" "An empty bowl, master." The elder looked at him tenderly and said, "Exactly. An empty bowl is always ready to receive. If it were full, nothing else could enter." Liang felt a slight tremor inside him, but he still did not fully understand. The wind blew through the window of the small room, gently moving the master's robe. Liang gazed at the empty bowl, his mind still searching for understanding. "Master, do you mean that I must be like the bowl?" he asked doubtfully. The elder nodded. "If your mind is full of ideas, judgments, and certainties, there will be no space to receive the truth. But if you remain empty, open, and willing, learning will flow effortlessly." Liang felt something inside him loosen, as if an invisible rope had stopped tightening his chest. But doubts still remained in his heart. "And the robe, master? Why do you still wear it if it is so worn out?" The elder took it between his fingers and smoothed it carefully. "Because it still serves its purpose. When it no longer does, I will let it go without regret. This is how everything is in life, Liang. We cling to what we believe gives us identity, but nothing truly belongs to us." Liang lowered his gaze. He had spent years seeking the great truth in books and speeches, without realizing that the teaching had always been in front of him, in every simple action of his master. The wind blew a little stronger, and in its murmur, Liang thought he heard the echo of an ancient and profound truth. That night, Liang could not sleep. The image of the empty bowl and the worn robe floated in his mind like leaves in a stream. He got up in the darkness and went out to the monastery courtyard, where the moon shone with a soft light. His master was there, sitting silently under a flowering plum tree. Liang approached and, without a word, sat beside him. They remained there for a while, listening only to the sound of the wind between the branches. Finally, Liang broke the silence. "Master, I think I am beginning to understand, but there is still something that unsettles me. If everything changes, if nothing belongs to us, what is the point of following this path?" The elder looked at the sky and pointed to the moon. "Liang, what do you see up there?" "The full moon," bright and serene. And if it rains tomorrow, will it still be there? Liang nodded. Even if the clouds hide it, the moon is still present. The master smiled tenderly. This is the teaching, this is the path. It is not about clinging to words or possessions, but about seeing clearly what has always been there. No matter how many times the clouds cover the moon, if you learn to trust, you will know that the light has never gone. Liang felt his breath become slower, deeper. Something inside him settled like dust after a breeze. The master closed his eyes and said quietly, "Go rest, Liang. Understanding does not come with haste." The young monk bowed his head in respect and withdrew. For the first time in a long time, as he lay down, he felt that his mind was like his master's bowl, empty and ready to receive. The next morning, Liang woke feeling light, as if something invisible had fallen off his shoulders during the night. He dressed calmly and went out to the courtyard, where he found his master sweeping the fallen leaves. The young monk watched in silence. Each movement of the elder was simple, unhurried, as if each leaf picked up had its own place in the order of the universe. After a while, Liang approached. "Master, may I help you?" The elder nodded and handed him the broom. Liang began to sweep carefully, but his mind was still full of thoughts. "Master," he finally asked, "if the teaching is like the moon behind the clouds, if there is nothing we should cling to, why do we continue with these daily routines? Why sweep if tomorrow there will be more leaves?" The elder smiled, took a leaf from the ground, and let it fall again. "Liang, do we sweep so that no more leaves will ever fall?" The young monk reflected. "No, we sweep because in this moment there are leaves on the ground." "Exactly," answered the master. "We live this moment. When there are leaves, we sweep them. When there are none, we simply walk." Liang felt his hands relax on the broom handle. He had always seen daily tasks as something that had to be done, as an obligation. But in that instant, he understood. The true practice was not in achieving a result, but in giving oneself fully to each action, without resistance or attachment. The wind blew gently, carrying a few more leaves into the courtyard. Liang smiled and continued sweeping. Days passed, and although the words of his master still resonated within him, Liang still felt that something was missing. He had understood the importance of emptying oneself, of accepting change, of being present in each action, but his heart was still searching for something more. One afternoon, while walking along the path surrounding the monastery, he saw his master sitting by the river. He approached silently and sat beside him. The elder was gazing at the water with a serene expression. Without taking his eyes off the river, he asked, "Liang, tell me, what do you see?" The young monk observed the clear stream, the incessant movement of the current. "I see the river flowing, master. And if you throw a stone, what happens?" Liang picked up a small stone and threw it into the water. It sank with a soft sound, and ripples formed on the surface that soon faded. It sinks and leaves ripples, but the river keeps flowing. The elder nodded with a slight smile. "Such is the mind, Liang. Sometimes thoughts, emotions, doubts come like stones in the water. But if you do not cling to them, if you let them be, the current will carry them, and everything will return to its course." Liang felt his breath becoming more peaceful. Then, should I not fight against my thoughts? It is not struggle that quiets the mind, but acceptance, answered the master. The teaching is not about emptying yourself to never fill again, but about learning to flow without resistance. Liang closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the water. For the first time, he didn't try to understand with his mind, but to feel with his whole being. That night, Liang sat in the stillness of his room. The echo of the conversation with his master still lingered in his mind, but instead of trying to grasp it, he simply let it pass. like the water in the river. While observing the dim light of the lamp, a new question arose within him. If everything flows, if nothing remains, then what are we, truly? The next morning, he decided to share his concern with his master. He found him in the garden, stirring the soil around an old plum tree. "Master, I have understood that the mind is like a river and that the teaching is like the moon behind the clouds. But I still wonder, if everything changes and flows, then what are we, really?" The elder stopped and pointed to the tree. "Liang, look at this plum tree. Every year it blossoms in spring, its leaves fall in autumn, and yet it remains the same tree." "Yes, but it changes with the seasons." "Exactly. Changes, and yet it remains the same. Now tell me, Liang, where does the essence of the tree reside? Is it in its leaves? In its flowers? In its trunk?" Liang observed the tree carefully. He could not point to one part and say, "Here lies the true tree," and yet there it was alive before him. The elder smiled. "So too are we. We are not just our body, nor our thoughts, nor our emotions. We are the space where all that happens. Like the tree, we transform with time, but there is something that always remains. The awareness that observes, the silence that encompasses all." Liang felt a chill run through his skin. Suddenly, he understood that he did not need to search for a definitive answer. His existence was like the tree, like the river, like the wind that comes and goes without attachments. In the following days, Liang observed everything around him with new eyes. He saw the monks in their daily tasks, the wind moving the branches of the plum tree, the water flowing in the nearby stream. Everything changed, everything flowed, and yet everything was complete in each moment. One afternoon, while folding his own robe after washing it, he remembered his master's old robe. He wondered how long he had carried it with him, how many times he had patched it, how many winters he had endured with it. Moved by curiosity, he approached the elder and asked, "Master, your robe is worn out, but you still wear it. Isn't it time to replace it?" The elder smiled and ran his hand over the frayed fabric. "When the time comes, Liang, I will let it go. But it still covers me, it still fulfills its function." Liang nodded, but something in the master's response left him thinking. Later, while meditating in the garden, the words returned to his mind. "When the time comes, I will let it go." Suddenly, he understood. The robe was just a symbol. His master did not cling to it, just as he did not cling to anything in life. When something fulfilled its purpose, he used it with gratitude. When it was no longer necessary, he let it go without regret. Liang felt a profound peace. That night, while gazing at the moon in the sky, he understood that his master's teaching was not in his words, but in the way he lived. The robe, the bowl, the tree, the river, everything had been a silent teaching. There was nothing to attain, nothing to possess. There was only to live, moment by moment, like the moon shining through the clouds. Days passed, and Liang began to notice a change within himself. He no longer felt the same urgency to obtain answers, nor the weight of his own search. Now, each day in the monastery was simply what it was. The morning light on the stones of the path, the aroma of rice cooking, the sound of the wind passing through the trees. One afternoon, while walking through the nearby forest, he saw a young monk sitting by a tree, furrowing his brow and staring at the ground. He stopped and asked kindly, "What worries you?" The young monk sighed. "I've been studying the teachings, but the more I read, the more confused I feel. I don't know what I really need to understand." Liang smiled. He saw himself reflected in that young man, remembering his own restlessness from time ago. Without saying a word, he sat beside him and picked up a dry leaf from the ground. He held it between his fingers and then let it fall. The young monk looked at him, puzzled. "What does that mean? What do you think it means?" Liang replied. The young monk furrowed his brow, trying to decipher the gesture. After a while, he sighed and said, "I don't know. It's just a falling leaf." Liang nodded. "Exactly, just a falling leaf." The young monk blinked. Something in his expression changed, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. Liang smiled and stood up. "Don't try too hard to understand. The truth is in everything if you let it be." And without adding anything else, he continued on his way. That night, Liang sat in his usual corner, by the window. Through the glass, he observed the twinkling stars in the night sky. Each one seemed to be in its place, effortlessly shining simply by being. Suddenly, he felt a presence beside him. He looked toward the door and saw his master enter the room, with his half-worn robe and bowl in hand. The old man sat in front of him, silently, and they both contemplated the night. Finally, the master spoke softly. "Liang, what have you learned so far?" Liang thought for a moment. "I've learned that it's not about clinging to anything, that everything flows, everything changes, and there's no need to force anything. That, like the moon behind the clouds, the truth is always there, waiting to be seen, but it cannot be rushed." The master nodded, satisfied. "Very well, but I also want you to remember something else. The true teaching is not found only in intellectual understanding. It's like this night. The sky is clear, the stars are shining, but the truth is not in the stars. It's in the stillness of the night, in the peace that comes when we stop searching for something outside of ourselves." Liang nodded, feeling a deep peace in his words. The master continued, "The teaching is in what you do without thinking, in every daily action, in every breath. When you stop searching for the truth in the future, when you stop clinging to the past, you realize that everything is here, now." Liang looked at his master, and for a moment, everything he had learned seemed to condense in that gaze. The master needed no more words. He himself was the teaching. The next day, the monastery was as quiet as always. But for Liang, something had changed inside him. The daily activities no longer felt like obligations. Sweeping the floor, meditating, the simple act of walking through the garden. Everything seemed to be imbued with a profound stillness. That afternoon, as he watched the constant flow of the nearby river, Liang felt a gentle breeze caress his face. The water slid smoothly over the stones, without haste, without resistance. A thought crossed his mind. This is how my life should be. As he approached the bench where his master usually sat, he saw the old man beneath the tree, seemingly absorbed in nature. Liang sat beside him, silently, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. Finally, the master broke the silence. "Do you know, Liang, why the river never stops?" Liang looked at him, curious. "Why, master?" The old man smiled, as if he already knew the answer in his heart. "Because it has no purpose beyond the flowing itself. It doesn't fight against time, nor against the stones. It simply is. Life does not need to have a distant purpose, a goal to reach. The purpose is in every step, every breath, every moment." Liang thought about this as he observed the water. Each drop, each curve of the river seemed so simple, so natural. It was hard to believe that something as complex as life itself could be so simple. The master continued, "The river doesn't ask if it is being useful. It doesn't question if it is enough. It just flows, nothing more." Liang felt something stir within him, as if a layer of darkness had been removed. At times, he had been so concerned with understanding everything, with finding definitive answers, that he had forgotten the most important thing: to live fully each moment as it is. The days continued to flow like the river Liang had so often meditated on. Every morning, the sun rose over the horizon, and the young monk no longer rushed to reach an understanding. Peace seemed to envelop him effortlessly, like a cool breeze slipping through the trees. One day, while sweeping the courtyard, he saw one of the younger monks approaching in a hurry, as if he were fleeing from something. The young monk looked at him, and without stopping, murmured, "Liang, how do you stay so calm all the time?" Liang stopped sweeping, looked at him, and smiled gently. "It's not that I do it, my friend. Tranquility is not something to achieve, but something to allow. Like the empty bowl my master showed me, peace comes when you let go of the inner noise and accept what is." The young monk looked confused, so Liang invited him to sit beside him on the garden bench. "Come, sit with me for a moment. Let the air come into you." They both sat, and as the wind brushed their faces, Liang continued, "Think of the running water. It doesn't fight against the stones. It simply flows around them. The mind is the same. Worries, thoughts, doubts are like the stones in the river. If you let them be, the water will keep flowing. If you cling to them, the flow stops." The young monk looked at the garden for a long time, and little by little, the tension on his face began to relax. Liang didn't need to say more. The stillness of the moment spoke everything that words could not express. That night, while meditating under the starry sky, Liang remembered his master's words. "The teaching is in what you do without thinking, in every daily action, in every breath." These words began to sink deep into his being. He no longer felt the need to seek more, to understand more. The path was not something to be reached. It was something to be lived. The silence of the night felt deeper than ever. It was as if the entire universe was in that stillness. The distant call of an owl, the creaking of the branches under the wind, the fragrance of the nocturnal flowers. Everything was part of a perfect whole. The master appeared in the threshold of his room, as if he had sensed the silent restlessness in his disciple. Liang bowed in respect but said nothing. The old man sat beside him, looking at the sky with a calmness that seemed eternal. "Liang," said the master after a while, "do you know what the greatest teaching a monk can receive is?" Liang thought for a moment and then shook his head. "It's not a book, nor a bowl, nor a robe. It's not even a word. The greatest teaching is the present moment, when you let go of everything you know, when you don't try to be anything other than what you are." Liang looked at his master, finally understanding the depth of his teaching. It was not about reaching a state of perfection or knowledge, but about living fully, without worrying about what will come or what has already passed. In that instant, the stars shone more brightly, as if the entire universe were confirming that the truth was not in searching, but in accepting the simplicity of being. The next day dawned clear, and Liang, upon waking, did not feel the need to rush into anything. He rose calmly, took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, and with quiet steps, he walked out into the garden. Everything seemed in its place, as if the entire world had reached a perfect balance. That morning, the master was not in his usual spot. Liang decided to search for him throughout the monastery and finally found him near the river, as always watching the water flow without stopping. The old man looked up and smiled upon seeing his disciple approach. "Master, what are you searching for in the water?" asked Liang, curious. The master looked at him for a long moment before replying. "The same answer I seek in everything I see. Nothing in particular. Just looking without expecting, without the need to understand. The water flows because that is its nature, and I simply observe it. I don't hurry it, nor do I change it. I let it be." Liang sat next to him, silently, and observed the river. The current never stopped, yet it didn't seem rushed. Along its path, the water always found a way to pass, even when the stones tried to interrupt its course. The young monk understood that this was the key to the teaching: to be like the water, flowing effortlessly, accepting the stones in the path without trying to force anything. "Master," Liang finally said, "what about us? Should we be like the river?" The master nodded slowly. "That's right. But remember, the river does not fear the stones nor the rapids. It adapts. It does not grieve when it encounters obstacles, because it knows that everything passes. Its nature is to flow, and no matter what it finds, it always moves forward." Liang closed his eyes, feeling the breeze on his face, the tranquility of the moment enveloping him like a hug. This was the moment of greatest clarity he had had in a long time. It wasn't about doing something great or achieving something far away, but simply existing, like the river or the tree, accepting each moment as it is. The days continued to flow with the same stillness, and Liang began to see life in the monastery in a completely new way. He no longer clung to the details, nor worried about whether he was doing things correctly. The act of sweeping the floor, preparing tea, meditating, everything had become a natural process, free of effort and judgment. One afternoon, while walking along the path that bordered the monastery, he encountered a young monk, so caught up in his thoughts that he didn't notice the stone in his path. He stumbled and fell to the ground with a dull thud. Liang, watching from a distance, quickly approached to help him up. The young monk rubbed his knee and looked at Liang with a mix of shame and frustration. "I always trip, master," he said with regret. "I'm not as skilled as the other monks. My mind is always full of thoughts. How can I find peace if I can't even walk without falling?" Liang looked at him with compassion and, instead of giving an intellectual answer, pointed to the path before them. "Look at the path. It's covered with stones, roots, and uneven earth. But the path is still the path. And even if you stumble, the path doesn't change. The only thing that changes is how you face the stumbles. You can get up or you can stay there lamenting, but the path will continue and so will you." The young monk thought about his words and slowly got up, looking at the path with new eyes. Liang smiled and continued on his way. He knew the young monk had understood something deep, not through words, but through the lived experience. Peace does not come from searching for it, but from accepting that everything is part of the natural flow of life. The stumbles, the falls, the laughter, the tears. Each step had its value not because it was perfect, but because it was lived. As time passed, Liang realized that the true essence of the master's teachings was not found in words, but in the way he lived. Every gesture, every action of the old man was a lesson, a deep and silent teaching that didn't need to be explained, but simply observed and understood in the heart. One morning, while the master was sitting under a willow tree, Liang watched him in silence. The morning light illuminated his serene face, and the leaves gently fell around him, as if the wind had decided to stop and pay homage to his stillness. Liang approached, but before he could say a word, the master raised his hand and smiled. "Liang, have you ever wondered what it is that you really do when you breathe?" Liang, accustomed to the master's questions, sat beside him without responding, ready to receive the teaching. "The breath comes, and the breath goes," said the master. "But in between those two moments, there is nothing, just emptiness. The air enters, the air exits, and in that space, everything is possible. That is life. It's not about accumulating or possessing. It's about letting go, about being like the air, without resistance, without attachment." Liang closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the air fill his lungs. Each breath seemed to empty him, letting go of everything unnecessary. In that space between the entering and exiting of the air, he understood something important. Life is not about clinging to the past or fearing the future. It's about being present in the moment without expectations, without fears. The master watched him with a calm expression. Don't seek the truth in the future, nor chase it in the past. Everything you seek is here, now, in the breath you take and in the breath you give. Truth is not something you find, but something you experience in each moment, effortlessly. Liang felt a deep gratitude, not for the words, but for the clarity they offered. In that moment, he understood that the true teaching was a way of life, not an idea or an intellectual understanding. One day, while the monastery rested in the calm of the afternoon, Liang was in the garden, watching how the shadows of the trees slowly lengthened on the ground. The gentle breeze moved the leaves, creating a whisper that seemed to speak to the heart. He felt a profound connection to everything around him. The earth beneath his feet, the sky above his head, the birds flying high. It was in that moment when the young monk returned, his face full of questions, as always. Liang greeted him with a kind smile and invited him to sit beside him. "Master, I have a question I can't seem to resolve," the young monk began, his voice filled with unease. "I feel like I'm searching for something I can never find. I live between thoughts and desires that I can't stop, and I wonder if I will ever achieve the peace that everyone seeks here." Liang looked at him with compassion, feeling the same emptiness he had once felt. But instead of offering a quick answer, he simply pointed to the sky. "Look at the clouds," he said softly. "Have you ever tried to stop them or force them to stay?" The young monk looked at the sky, where the clouds passed slowly, without hurry. "No, the clouds just pass like the wind, like the seasons," he replied. Liang nodded slowly. "That is the mind. Thoughts come and go, like the clouds. You cannot stop them, nor hurry them. But if you let them pass without holding on to them, without fighting them, you will realize that, by their own nature, thoughts dissipate." The young monk seemed to understand, and for a moment, his face relaxed, as if an invisible burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Liang continued, "It's not about reaching a state of empty mind, but about letting the mind be like the sky, vast, without limits, without attachment. Thoughts are only clouds, and the sky is your true nature." The young monk gazed at the sky for a long time, and in that moment, something deep shifted within him. Peace was not about fighting the thoughts, but about allowing them to come and go like everything else, naturally, without resistance. The season began to change, and with it, Liang noticed a subtle shift within himself. He no longer sought answers or felt impatient. Peace had begun to inhabit him, as if he had become part of the landscape itself. The monastery, the river, the trees, even the stones, no longer seemed separate from him, but merged with his being, each playing its perfect role in the great whole. One day, the master found him meditating near the river. Liang stood up upon seeing him and, as usual, bowed in respect. "Master, I no longer feel the need to ask any more questions," said Liang, with a serenity that even surprised him. The master smiled gently, as if he had already known what Liang was going to say. He sat beside him, and in silence, they both watched the flowing water, which moved without stopping. After a while, the master broke the silence. "There are no more questions because there is no need for answers. The tranquil mind does not cling to anything, does not hold on to words or ideas. It is like the river water, which continues its course without worries. The peaceful mind is like this river. It flows without judging, without clinging, just being." Liang nodded, feeling a sense of full understanding. He no longer needed to seek more. The truth was not something that could be attained through conscious effort. The truth was in the way he lived, in how he breathed, in how he walked. The master, seeing the peace in his disciple, continued, Always remember this. True teaching is not found in books, nor in words, nor in explanations. It is in every action, in every breath, in every step. Life itself is the teaching, and all you have to do is be present. Liang looked at the master with gratitude, feeling that the final pieces of the puzzle had clicked into place in his heart. There was nothing more to seek, nothing more to find. Life unfolded before him, perfect as it was, and all he had to do was live it. Days later, the monastery was preparing to celebrate the changing of the season. The leaves were beginning to fall from the trees, as if nature itself was letting go of the old to make way for the new. Liang participated in the rituals, but something within him had changed. He no longer felt that he had to find something, or that he was searching for an answer. Everything he did, from sweeping the floor to serving tea, had become an expression of the same stillness he had learned to embrace. One day, while sweeping the courtyard, a young monk approached Liang and looked at him with curiosity. "Master, how do you manage to live this way? Without haste, without effort, without worries. Don't you get tired of being so calm?" Liang looked up and smiled, putting the broom aside. There was no hurry, no need to rush. Tranquility is not something to achieve, but something to allow. It's like the river, which flows because there is no obstacle preventing it from continuing its course. Life is the same. When you let go of what you don't need, when you accept what is, everything becomes natural. The young monk stood thoughtful, as if Liang's words had opened a door in his mind. "But how can I let go of everything that worries me?" he asked with uncertainty in his voice. Liang looked at the sky for a moment, then leaned slightly toward him. "It's not about fighting your worries. It's about recognizing them as clouds passing through the sky. Don't identify with them. Let them come and go like the wind. Peace is not in stopping the storms, but in observing them without being dragged along by them." The young monk nodded slowly, as if understanding for the first time the simplicity of the truth. Liang watched as the young monk walked away, and for a moment, he stayed there, in the silence of the monastery. Life flowed around him, and he simply was there without effort, without the desire to change anything. Every moment was enough as it was. Over time, Liang realized that peace was not a destination, but a way of being in the world. Every action, no matter how small, became an act of meditation. Walking on the path covered in leaves, listening to the birds singing at dawn, even the simple act of serving a cup of tea. There was no longer any difference between meditation time and living time. They were all one. One day, the master approached Liang while he was meditating under a tree. The elder watched him in silence, and at last he sat beside him. Liang, feeling his presence, opened his eyes and smiled. "Master, how does one continue the path after all this?" Liang asked, no longer with doubt, but with calm curiosity. The master did not respond immediately. He looked around at the garden, the river flowing softly, the mountains in the distance. Then, with his soft but deep voice, he said, "The path does not end, but it also has no end. Like the river, it flows endlessly, but its destination is the same. It is the same water always, and even when it seems to change, it is the same. The important thing is not to try to hurry it or avoid it. Just be present in every current." Liang then understood that the path was not an effort, not a burden or an achievement. It was living fully, without anticipation or attachment. The master slowly stood up, and Liang did the same in silence. They looked at each other for a moment, and in that gaze, Liang saw everything he had learned. That teaching was not something that could be transferred from one mind to another, but something that had to be lived, experienced. And when the disciple is ready, the teaching simply blossoms in the heart, like a flower opening to the sun. They both walked toward the monastery, in silence, knowing that there was nothing more to say. The peace they sought was not something they could find in some distant future. It was here, in every step they took, in every breath they drew, in every gesture they made. The master, with his half tunic, and Liang, with his heart open, knew that everything was complete, and all that was left to do was live it, moment by moment. The cycle was complete, and the path continued always,